There we go.
Okay.
We are live now.
All right.
Yay, technology.
We can do it. Every time it's an adventure.
Right? Yeah. But I guess like for starters, do you want to tell us about yourself, Edward?
Oh, all right. Where do I begin? I always start with where I was born because it is always a weird conversation starter. Is YOLO, California. That's where I was born, and people always make the joke. Really? Is that a real city? It's like, yes, it's a real tiny city up in the Northern California area. And then I just moved around like a lot, probably like 4 or 5 times, moving from New York, Michigan, Korea, Virginia, and now here. So the term people use with that is they call those people third culture kids when you, especially when you go to different countries and you experience different cultures in your early life. So for a lot of us, it kind of has this culture confusion of just like, where do you exactly fit? And it applies to all ethnicities, regardless of whatever you are. If especially like when I was in Korea, I would meet Caucasian folks who've been in Korea their entire lives. So they always have this weird displacement where they're like, culturally, they feel more Korean than they are the Caucasian values of that. But then they know, they're like, I cannot call myself Korean. That's ridiculous. But I cannot identify with the rest of my white colleagues of that. So it's just interesting in terms of that. As an actor, it started in high school, only because I had massive rage issues. Like lots of anger, so much anger. And so I think my high school drama teacher, she was a Kansas woman named Mrs. Moon. She was like, you got a lot of emotions in you. I think you should join my drama class. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so that's where it kind of got started. And then it continued through college. And then in terms of like appreciating the arts, I was fortunate to meet very wonderful people, especially in college. College of William and Mary, which is in Williamsburg, Virginia. It's a very activist oriented college. Like there's so many people who are dedicating themselves, and to this day, to in terms of like bettering the human condition and just like in terms of the issues that we face in this world. So I had massive giants in my as my peers. And so in that environment, there was a theater professor and we started a performance arts group that was dedicated for historically excluded folks, because in our college, most everything that was there was basically, shall we say, sentimental, melodramatic 19th century dramas, which didn't really allow for people of global majority, which is what I call people of color, to play a major role in it. So it was a great experience to then launch right into Los Angeles. So I moved to Los Angeles in 2010. And I knew right away, like my parents, I had, of course, the stereotypical Asian parents that are like, do not be an actor. Please, for the love of God, do not be an actor. You'll be broke. You'll live in a box. And that's it. That's your career prospects. And so I wrote them a 5-page essay of why I should be an actor. And I realized, I'm like, I cannot believe I wrote an essay to convince my parents why I should do this. And finally, they relented. And so here we are. At first, my mom was very against it. My dad was super supportive. And then for whatever reason, in the last few years, it completely reversed. My mom is the biggest supporter. Like she's the cheerleader. If I have one line in a TV show, she's like, oh my God, Edward's in this. And I'm like, did you get taken over by an alien? Because like at the beginning, and I told you I had one line in a TV show and you're like, that's it? Okay, that's a disappointment. And I'm like, thanks, Mom. So then that's where all that stuff, in terms of like the voiceover stuff, that did not kick in until the last about 3 years ago. And that one was through sheer luck and privilege, because the manager I had at the time and still do just asked me at some gala event at some film festival, because he had a client there and I was just hanging around, and he was like, hey Edward, what do you think about voiceover? And I'm like, I would love to. It's great. Like, I have so many icons I admire, like whether it be like Mark Hamill or Keith Richardson, like these folks I aspire to, but I don't know. And he's like, do you want a voiceover agent? And I'm like, is this a trick question? And he's like, no, it's not a trick question. I'll set you up a meeting. And then he'd like boopity boop boop on his phone. And then he was like, all right, you have a meeting tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, this must be what white people experience when things just happen. Like things are just given to you. And I'm just like, what? Because to get you, my manager, I had to work my ass off. And then my agent's like, oh my God. And then now I'm like, oh, here's an agent. And so I met, and it was with Heather Dame at Atlas Talent. And it wasn't just a straight giveaway. She had to ask me questions, make sure I wasn't crazy and actually was good and whatever. So, there was that process. But just to even get into that room was a privilege that I know so many voiceover actors do not have, because they have to slave. I didn't have a voiceover demo reel. I didn't even know what that was. So they had, that's the formal process. And so I bypassed all of that. And then basically I had to play catch up, like as soon as I was in there, because then I would be, immersed with the world of voiceover actors and to know what they go through and everything. And then I realized, oh my God, I am a wee little baby at this. So I need to catch up quickly. And so basically follows to where I am now in terms of people ask, what do you do? What do you like doing? I always go by the saying that Danny Trejo does. I remember listening to an interview where he's like, if you give me a house, I'll paint it. And I always love that quote, because I'm like, yeah, just, I don't care. Like if it's like voiceover, theater, commercials, television, film, horror films, indie films, student films, I'm just happy to be employed. I'm just happy to act. Okay. Just give me a job. So that basically summarizes now, other than my extreme obsession with Cinnabon, which is another story entirely about that. So there we are. That is a very rough summary of my life.
Thank you for sharing that with us. There are so many things that I want to pick apart, especially with your Asian, heritage and your family and things like that. I guess I'm curious, how are they? You said that your mom is your biggest supporter now.
Yes.
Now that you are further in your VO career and things like that, has that changed?
She was a supporter even before the whole VO career. Now she seems to be even more so, because I tell her that I do a good amount of these Netflix English dubs or Korean TV shows, and she's like, whoa, I watch those shows. You're telling me that I can change the audio track and I'll hear you doing it. And I'm like, yeah, but I wouldn't recommend it, because some of those performers, I'm like, I think I did okay, but it's always a joke that voiceover actors know all too well, when a session director just goes, all right, we're moving on, and then the actor goes, did I do okay? And they're like, we're moving on. Did I do okay? I don't know. So I don't know. So I'm like, I hear it, and I'm like, oh, I think I could have done better on that, as we all do. We always second guess ourselves. And I'm sure the director's like, no, genuinely, Edward, you were great. You shouldn't, always second guess yourself, but you we can't help it. We stare at ourselves and be like, oh, yikes. That's what I sound like? Holy, I thought I would sound sexier, but but yeah.
All the time. That's really, really awesome. How hard was it to tell your parents that because you said that they're like, don't go to California, don't become an actor. But when you wrote that paper, the 5-page paper, how nervous were you to give it to them?
I was nervous, but at the same time, they saw it coming, because it's I spent all my high school rehearsing till 7 p.m. and then going home to actually do my homework and doing it terribly. So they knew I spent so much time in the theater department in high school, and I was doing it all throughout college. And they will always, they're very clever. They'll always try to be like, being a lawyer is like being an actor. You are performing, you are bullshitting in front of people to make people believe what you have to say. So it's really interchangeable. And at first I was kind of I would listen to what they say, and I would check out, I would ask, people who are going through the law track, and then I would read books about it. And then what I discovered was that there was no way in hell that I would ever be a lawyer. It just sounds like just going through law school, massive respect to people who go through that insanity of law school. yikes, holy moly. I thought actors being tough, but like all the studying and all the testing and all the everything you had to do to actually pass the law, the bar
Mhm.
exam. And I'm like, yeah, I am too stupid for that. So not to say that being an actor is only for stupid people. It requires the most diligent and shrewd minds to succeed in this career for sure. But especially like my respect to people who do pursue the doctor path or the lawyer path. I'm just like, I don't know how you guys do it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I get tired just going to jury duty.
Oh my god.
I think
um,
that you do have similar skill sets, and I think that that's why you see a lot of creatives end up being a lawyer, doctor,
Yes.
or a an artist of some kind, but succeeding kind of highly is like as long as you have that work ethic and you apply it to whatever career. So I bet you could have been a lawyer. It just would have been way more boring.
Oh yeah. My dad would always like I forgot this actor, and he's like an older white gentleman, and he was a lawyer, and he still he is, I don't know if that is if he's still alive at this point, but he would show me movies like The Hunt for Red October, and it's like, see that guy? He's a lawyer and he acts. That's what you can be. You can be a lawyer, make a lot of money, and then be an actor because you have so much money. If you're an actor, you have no money. And I'm like, eh. So
but you have money for the soul.
Right.
yes, I have money for the soul. I'm not stressed out. I'm just living a life where if I want to, I could just wake up at 3 p.m. if I feel like it. That's my freedom. Okay. Even if I have like no money in my pocket, it's freedom, baby.
Heck yeah.
What would you say is the biggest difference when you went from on camera to voiceover?
The biggest difference, I think, for me, like I was always a theater kid, and I
Mhm.
still am, and I love theater, and I realized theater and voiceover, there's not too many barriers. Like a lot of it does transcend well, and so theater actors in some ways can transcend very well into the voiceover, especially when it comes to animation. When it comes to on-camera stuff, some that area where it translates very well is usually the live action dubbings, because
Mhm.
they do want it naturalistic. They don't want you to go over the top or anything. And so on camera, I do enjoy it, but it's always the theater, man. There's nothing like performing in front of a live audience. And I've had the privilege of being able to perform in front of a crowd of like 600 people 7 days a week, and just doing that for a month. And
Mhm.
so that is there's nothing like it. And so voiceover is that's the most fun I can have compared to theater, where you get these character additions, like, okay, today you're going to be this demon, today you're going to be like this shrewd little mouse or whatever, and you have to use your imagination to make it work. And so the biggest difference is just like the freedom to know that,
Mhm.
especially for a lot of these original creations, they have not even made the character yet, and even though the breakdown says this kind of person, it can always change because of your voice. And so that does happen in on camera, where they can see you be like, okay, we originally had like a 6 foot tall like blonde woman, but then someone else came into the room and they're like, oh my god, maybe you're the one. And that does happen, but voiceover, I feel like, allows more of that flexibility, because they can just change it. They can just,
Mhm.
they'll tell the animators like, okay, we're going to change that, whatever concept we had. And so I think it's just like the power of the voice in some ways is more freeing, especially for people who are historically excluded, or who have disabilities and are restricted by that, because the on-camera world is rather biased in terms of
Mhm.
what you look like. So that if you are an amputee, or if you have a disability, or you are historically excluded, they will only judge you on what they see, and they can't get around that. But voice, you know, that's why in some ways, like especially during the pandemic, I would, when I see on-camera actors getting like virtually in the Zoom world, if we are in commercial editions, and they would tell me, they're like, voiceover has become in some ways more fun than the on camera, because it's just like the freedom that comes with it, and I cannot disagree with that. It's better in so many ways.
When speaking about like the historically excluded, you created the People of Global Majority VO List.
Yes.
Assuming that there's someone out there who has not heard of it yet, could you explain to them what that is?
So what it is simply is that it is an open source database. It is a database where voiceover actors of global majority can put themselves in. And it started last June, right after all the tumultuous and chaotic events, especially with the events, the murder of George Floyd and the global Black Lives Matter movement and the reckoning that happened because of that. And so the voiceover industry definitely was put in a microscope because the question of just like authentic representation, which I know is a very hot topic because once again, we said earlier, it's about the voice. So people go, well, if it's about the voice, why does it matter what the person looks like? Which is a very, very valid argument. And the same valid argument I would apply to even to on camera about like, why can't white people play all these roles? The ideal world, the ideal utopian world is that anyone can play anyone. Like it does not matter. But, and that's what I tell people when people get very upset about this. And I always tell them it does. The difference is that we don't live in a utopian world. We live in a pretty messed up world. We live in a world where there's so many things that are against us, whether you are a minority as a woman, all these things. And so because of that, there does need to be, more effort to shift. And that is why the voiceover list was created, so that there was a database for Hollywood and the voiceover industry go, because I would always hear people would go, I don't know any Asian actors or Black actors or Indigenous or Middle Eastern or Latino actors. And especially for people who are of that, we know people, like we are surrounded by that. So that we kind of go, what do you mean you don't know anyone? That's ridiculous. And so I realized that especially for predominantly white institutions, they don't make the effort to look. Like some will, they will go above and beyond for it. And I appreciate the ones who do, but for the vast majority, they just won't. Or the more valid excuse is they don't have the time, which says a lot about the casting industry in terms of like how much they're paid, how much time they're given, which is not that much. So they're working with pennies. And so they are like, oh my God, I really want to be authentic, but I don't have the time. Like, especially for the on-camera world where they have to cast it the next day. And then they'll be like, oh crap, And so those like that is the value of where this particular list comes in. And so it made it a lot easier. And I think it started off with the Asian American because that was the circle I was most intimate with. And then someone suggested you should take on the entire people global majority. And I was like, that sounds insane, but hey, it was during June of the pandemic of last year. I had nothing to do. I was all of the theater kids were very depressed and none of them were doing anything. And the on-camera people, maybe a few were working, but the vast majority, we were just sitting on our butts, just going, what are we going to do with ourselves? How can we make a change in this world, especially with everything that was happening in the world around us? And so I was like, I will make an Excel sheet. I'm technologically incapable, even though my family tells me I should be better because I am Korean after all. And we should be good at this, right? No, I am terrible at this. So I made a Google Excel sheet and it was very, very rudimentary. And I was very lucky that the voiceover community in the Twitter world were very responsive. They were like, let's promote this. And I was surprised by it. I was like, it's just an Excel sheet. Like it's not fancy. And so that's how it took off. And then since then, especially in the past few months of this year, it has drastically changed in terms and also amplified to a degree I have never even thought possible in terms of where the people that wanted to get involved with it and the people, especially production companies and casting and the agencies who wanted to know and be part of this list so they can take advantage of it. So I am very grateful that everything has happened. But that is a long answer to your question of what the heck is this list? It's a database for people of global majority to sign up. The end.
Well,
Well,
I want to thank you for making it just like plainly and flatly, like as a casting professional, as someone who deals with trying to find actors on a daily basis, you have hit the nail on the head of like my number one philosophy, which is don't make me think. And you've just made it so easy. And I think one of the biggest issues that we run into beyond the speed of things and is just that it can be hard. It's hard to find sometimes.
Yeah.
But you've made it so easy that they don't have that excuse. I had a client come to me for casting not that long ago. They wanted to make sure it was representative casting. And they specifically said, you know, the last people we went to said it was going to take longer and cost more. And we're like, nope, that's not the case. It might take longer, but you're not going to see that effect because that's not your job. It's my job to have everyone, you know, at my fingertips. So if I'm missing something, that's on me, not on you, right? And also just because we have a commitment to that in general, but not everyone does. So thank you for making it easy, because that's like the number one thing.
It is my pleasure.
have you told your parents that you've created this list?
No, I haven't. I was just thinking about this. I was like, oh, I have to I'll be having this this hangout with you guys. And I was like, I have never told my parents. I think my mom knows because she like reshares everything I post on Facebook for whatever reason. But like I said, she has become the biggest supporter. So I think she knows. My dad has, yeah, my dad has no idea. So I should probably tell him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something that they would be really proud, especially since like you're not only helping your own community, but like other marginalized communities. And your list has even inspired an LGBTQIA
Yes.
plus list.
Yeah.
And a disability, a disabled
Yes,
actors.
I saw
right?
that too. Yeah.
Yes.
So I love it. Like like the more lists there, and the thing is, like even with this PGA voiceover, it is definitely not the first. I've seen other initiatives. Like I've seen, like I just was told like a few days ago, and I saw like for example, the African American voiceover club.
Yep.
And then also the founders of the APOC, the Bill Butts, Tiana Camacho, Zeno Robinson, uh, largely Black founded group. They've been doing it as well 2 years ago. So they have definitely set the foundation for it. And so with this PJ voice, it's not anything groundbreaking. The only difference is that I am very annoying, so that I tell people constantly, be like, hey, you should use this list. So if there's a difference between the others, me, I'm just really annoying. And so it's just like when there's like a casting breakdown, like, and people are like, oh, I can't seem to find Indian actors, and I go, hey, have you heard of the PGM voiceover list? Or if it's like, what I especially get excited about is that if I see like an indigenous voiceover actor or a Middle Eastern voiceover, because those are lesser in terms of the quantity. And I see them, they're like, hey, I have a new character demo reel. And I'm just like, hey, sorry if this is going to sound like a sales pitch, but you should join the PGA voiceover list. And more often than not, they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Sometimes, understandably, they get a little weirded out. They're like, oh my God, who are you? And why do you want me to join your cult? And so that is so I think for sure, like I have definitely, as a one-man team, like just doing all of that, and it's gotten to the point, the size has gotten to the point where I could see in the very near horizon, I'm like, if I try to do all of this myself, I will probably go insane. And so I'm very appreciative that there are people in the group who are like, dude, you need support, you need backup, you need people on your team. I'm there, man. And so I appreciate, and I will most definitely use it. And that's how even like the website came to be. This wonderful voiceover actress named Risa May was like, I'm really good at making websites. I would love to just make it voluntarily. And I'm like,
Yes.
really? I mean, and I always, it's probably because of my upbringing. Every time people willingly offer me free stuff, I am so skeptical. Like I get, not because of their intentions, I just get so like, I feel bad when people offer free service, because I'm just like, I feel like I have to give you money. Like I feel like I have to do something. Like should I dance for you or something? I don't know because it's it still blows my mind when people are willing to give. And I
Mhm.
know people say, well, Edward, that's what you're doing. You're giving to the PC. You're spending so many hours updating database and all that. And I guess for me, it's not work for me because it is, in a weird way, it is fun. Like I don't know why it's fun for me to do all these boring statistical like entry inputting kind of stuff, which is not usually what an actor mindset is. They just want to be free and express themselves, which is great. But I love putting data in. I'm also a nut when it comes to tracking all my editions. I know how many editions I've got in my entire lifespan. And so that is something that's has come to be since then.
Well, I'm a huge Airtable nerd. So the fact that you moved to Airtable was like such a win.
I was just like it was weird because like once it went from Google to and then I was like, oh, thank you. And then because Airtable allows you to easily transfer all the Google Excel data. And now I'm like, cool, what's so special about it? And then when I looked at the filter option, I'm like, you can filter?
And you can
Like
link things.
like like if I want to find, let's say, um like a Colombian like female identifying actor, I can do that as opposed to like, the Google stuff where you have to kind of like, manually guess it or just control F it and you got to do all of that circus. Now it just does it for you and just present it in this beautiful dish. And I'm just like, wow, that's
And you
thank you,
can add
Airtable.
things. Yeah, thank you,
Yeah,
Airtable.
yeah.
We could
Not
do
a
like a whole,
sponsor.
I know we could do a whole thing on Airtable.
Give us
Um,
money, Airtable.
I do want to actually mention something while I have your attention, which is I know that a lot of the focus is on VO, but as a performance capture casting director, I would love it if there was some kind of a checkbox for interested or interested in PCAP at all. Because for me, um, I don't have a PGM VO list for performance capture. And a lot of the resources that I use, like the casting networks and the breakdown services, you have to deal with the self submissions of, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of Caucasians for non white roles. Like, I mean, to the point that you have to open it to Actors Access in order to get the people that are unrepresented, right?
Right.
Once you open to Actors Access, you get all the people that have never understood the concept of am I right? And it's people and I can't go and educate every single one of them. So
Yep.
we do our best, but adding something for performance capture would be super awesome, especially because if you can handle voiceover, that gets you halfway there because most performance capture jobs have half of a voiceover element as well, right? To be able to do 3,000 lines in a booth and memorize and perform on set one day is
Yeah.
definitely an advantage. So that's my
That
request.
I would definitely put that in because in some ways the motion capture it is like on camera. It's like the ability to express of your face. So it's like for voiceover actors who are just purely voiceover actors, that is an entirely different ballpark. And I know that there are like, there are specifically motion capture classes, but I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that like those are extremely helpful without a doubt, but like because it is about your face, that's ultimately what they're recording. It does take like on camera classes or acting classes, not just voiceover acting classes, but like general acting classes, so that in terms of how you express yourself on your face, in your body, being comfortable with all of that, because ultimately that's what the motion capture is capturing. It's basically theater but with
Yes.
dots on you, lots of dots.
No props or like PVC props.
Yeah.
Yes, acting is. I kind of actually almost mentioned this right at the beginning when you were kind of describing yourself as an actor. You playing in all those different mediums that means you're truly an actor, right? And so I actually argue against the voiceover title a lot of times because it can pigeonhole people like you who act in all different places. There are definitely specialists and there are people who only ever want to act behind a microphone, and that's
Yeah.
perfectly okay. But for someone like me, whether it's a performance capture shoot or maybe mocap where you're lip syncing and you're not even actually talking, or voiceover only or commercial. Like I kind of touch it all. And so knowing what people are open to, even if you don't have the experience, is super helpful, especially as we are trying to make even the utility roles more representative. And I think motion capture is the area where we're still catching up to the changes, because you can get away with so much whitewashing in motion capture because you're not actually seeing the person. So there's tons of actors that will play against race, white actors that will play other races because they're playing 5 roles on the mocap stage that day. And people don't stop and think about it. It's just it's not there yet. So as we're trying to convince people to do that, being available and making it easy is part of that. So being able to shout out anybody on there that is open to the, and I'm sure the on-camera casting people like it too, but just kind of a checkbox for at least open to it would be super cool.
Would it be more specific, like interested / experience, so that it's not just like, would the interest be helpful? Because like everyone can say they're interested, but if they don't have experience in it, like, does that exactly help you?
Yeah, because we can't block this. If they don't have the experience, it might have been opportunity, right? So we don't want to block that. I think I wouldn't want to approach someone who definitely isn't interested, but at least if you're interested, it's worth an audition, right?
Oh, that makes sense, because there are a lot of voiceover actors who do not feel comfortable being seen on camera. So actually that makes a lot of sense. Just saying interested, which then tells you they're okay having a camera on their face. Actually, I'll make that change. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very excited to see it grow. And actually, one of my questions is, what do you want now that all these things are happening? Like, where do you want to see it go? What do you want from it?
Oh man, there's a lot. So what I've come to learn very, very quickly, and especially in the past few months, is that the list is great in terms of like, okay, here's all this diverse talent, but there are several things, I wouldn't call them obstacles, but they're definitely like the next things to accomplish. So what I've come to learn in terms of what I need to do with the list, and it's starting to happen now, where through very generous people like offering free classes and workshops so that people can learn, which is the education phase. What I've come to learn, and my agent and several other agents have told me that, they look at the list and it's great that there's all of these people, and they would go through it and they would pitch themselves and they would see if the actor is interested. And the feedback that these agents have told me is like, it is wonderful that there's so many, but let's say you have like 600. Out of that 600, maybe like 100 are like ready, like professionally, like not just that they have the good equipment, but they are like actor ready. Like they have the training, they can give the emotions, all that. It really limits it severely, which is not a surprise. That happens all the time at on-camera auditions, like even for like the big studio projects and primetime films. And it's just mind-blowing when casting folks would tell me, they're like, okay, we have, this major HBO show, we sent out like all these auditions, and maybe 10% are good. Like the rest don't know what the heck they're doing. And I'm just like, what, really? And I'm like, yeah, it's really, really small. And I'm like, okay, I'm not surprised. It's the same for here. And I know that for a lot of people, global majority, that it's the opportunity to have an education, to afford these classes, and they're not cheap. And especially with the pandemic times and how hard it is, but for everyone, it becomes even more so. And so it's like, how can we make this list be accessible in terms of education? And that is like the next step, whether it be people have the chipped in ideas, like maybe like doing a fundraiser or like grants, so that you get funded so that you can like make this happen, which I'm like, yeah, oh my god, yes. So that's definitely one of them. The other is that in terms of the next step is that I encourage actors, not just voiceover, but all actors, is that we are only actors. We do not have that much power. And so especially to be in a marginalized position, we have to be, as everyone has always told us in the years doing this industry, to be the creators, to be the ones in charge of casting, to be the directors, to be the writers, to do all of these things, So you're not just waiting for the opportunities to happen. And I think it is even more evident than ever that is something we all have to do. And so for the voiceover list, not just to encourage actors, but also to encourage the folks in the productions, like when it comes to higher ups, that there's only so much when everyone on board is like a heterosexual white Caucasian man. Like if everyone is that, and even though they say, hey, let's hire more women, let's hire more LGBT or diversity or that kind of thing. But for them, understandably, it is not their concern. They don't have to worry about it. So they'll think of diversity or like hiring women or LGBT as like a hot topic. And then I assure you that within like 6 months, they're going to forget about it. It's going to pass and they're going to go back to doing what they always do. And so it's just like the conversation is just to be aware that I am grateful for everyone who does use the list, but I always encourage be like, how can we get in there? How do we get into those positions? And so it's just that. And then the most difficult step, and this is something that's like representative of every aspect of this country, not just the entertainment industry, is that there is unfortunately the deep-seated racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia that is very, very apparent. They may not say it. They will code it with different language. They'll say like, it's not what we're looking for. They'll say all these things so that they're very like safe about it. But you know they don't want you. And you know because you've heard those words all your life. And so it's just like, being aware of that. And this is where like there are very, very different approaches of it. I unfortunately have gone when it comes to like when I'm dealing with folks like that who are very rigid minded, I unfortunately go for the burning the whole house down approach, which is not conductive or recommended for any actor in the industry. It has cost me many, many things. And yesterday I definitely got into hot waters doing so. Like I made a call out, and not to, because the thing is like for when actors announce gigs, it is more often not never their fault. It is like you cannot blame the actor, or sometimes even if they chose to, they chose to accept the role. We all got to eat. We all got to think. And I forget that. I get so hot-headed and righteous in my zealots, like, I got to make change. So, screw you and screw you and screw you. And I realize that it does no one good. And and there is always a time and place where there is a time for like a hot-headed fire approach. Like, I'm just going to go on to say on record, there is a particular company that has experienced a lot of sexist lawsuits, and that the state of California is suing right now. We all know what this company is. That company, yeah, go say what a shithead they are, because they are. Because if the state of California is suing them, something got messed up. Like, that's a real big problem. And so, but I think when it comes to the smaller guys, when it comes to the actors themselves, I forget that. And that's something that like I have to keep learning on my own to not blame the actor for the job. And I know I've hurt a lot of people, unfortunately, because I am a dimwit, I am a doof. And so and so that is something that I strive to try to improve. And I always tell actors to find a way, like, how do we encourage that? And I'm grateful for people, including my agent, to be like, hey, if you want to talk to production because they made a mistake, let's try that. Because my agent she has been an amazing ally. She has been like always on my side, and she knows how hot I get of these, and I make some pretty bad choices. And so she'll always be like, hey, let's try to like give you an alternative. And that's something that I appreciate, not just with her, but with everyone. Just be like, how can we find a conductive way to make change? And especially in this time, this climate right now, that it is so easy. And I still do, where like you always want to point fingers, be like, you're dumb and you're dumb and you're dumb and you're dumb. It's easy to do it, and you still do it even if you know better. But it's just like, I do understand and agree that to make change happen in this country, particularly, like, how do we have a conversation without everyone yelling at each other?
Yeah.
And it's not easy, because the other side might just keep yelling at you no matter what you do. And then you go, well, I tried. That's it. I'm not going to
I-
put any more energy into it.
But I do think you're right in that focusing on the actors and even the writers and things like that, you know, you don't know who had a role in what decision on the tree and who made the kind of the choices to go a certain direction. So it is wise to be careful about, you know, when we don't really know why the choice was made to go certain
Yeah.
ways or not. That said, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't critique things, and it doesn't
Mhm.
mean we shouldn't be pointing things out, because that's how people get better and
Yes.
that's how we improve.
Mhm.
And one of that kind of reminded me of this kind of crusade I'm on, just for the idea of non-union rates, and how there's this rate standard for non-union rates, which is widely accepted by a group of actors, which is fine, but it doesn't leave room for anyone to start. And it doesn't leave room for people who have never worked. And for me, I'm starting to tell actors that if they don't want to accept a certain rate, that they should refer someone who doesn't have as many opportunities as them. And then that should be our movement now, instead of yelling at the people not paying the money. They don't get your talent. And that's okay. Your talent will be spread to the other companies. You don't have to give those companies your talent. But what you can do is help someone else. And that should be our mentality, is just trying to extend that hand to the other people who aren't getting the opportunities. The ones who may not be ready in the agent's eyes are the ones that need those gigs in order to keep improving and learning.
Mhm.
That's actually a very good point you're making, and something that I never even really thought of, because I have like, I know that especially in the voiceover industry that like, and everyone knows, especially when it comes to like the topic of anime and how a lot of anime work is non-union these days. And so it can be like, especially for a hot-headed guy like me, like I can easily point fingers, and I have pointed fingers where I'm just like, why aren't you paying enough? Because that's garbage rates. But then at the same time, it's like you said, for actors who don't have that experience, that exposure, that opportunity, that privilege, it is to be able to dub one of their favorite anime shows on a network and be able to put themselves on is a blessing. That being said, I do understand to never be complacent. There's a difference between celebrating and also being like, okay, great, how can we do better?
Mhm.
And that's where I'm like, okay, that's the approach that I'm trying to have more in my life. It's like, okay, celebrating the good, like awesome, but how can we do better? As opposed to my normal approach is, you suck, I hate you, I'm gonna call you out on social media, and everyone's gonna be angry and nothing gets done. So yeah.
It's definitely easy to do that, and it's hard to get your message across when you have like what 280 characters to, you know, say what you want to say. But Julie and I, before you hopped on, we actually had a discussion about what specifically some of the stuff that I saw you post, and kind of like getting into what I wanted to know what her opinion was, and she let me know that like sometimes it's not exactly what you said. It's not the actor's decision. It sometimes is not even like the writers. Maybe it's like the publisher, producer, or something. And I think that is something that a lot of people need to kind of be aware about when they're navigating these spaces. But it's also at the same time, it's okay to be enraged to kind of like trying to ask for change.
Yes.
So it's definitely like a hard balance, especially since there's so much fear of like being like blacklisted or and something like that. But I think
I just want to hit piggyback off of that. There was a casting. I remember there was like it was like a CSA seminar, Casting Society of America, and one of them was her suggestion was like to never be political on social media, which I get. I understand that, but we are artists and we are human beings, and especially in the world of all these things happen, I do believe in standing up to what you truly believe. So if you are someone who go, hey, trans rights, trans people are like, trans women are women, or Black Lives Matter, or like stop Asian hate, and if you're going to get industry people who will say, I'm not going to hire you because of that, I rather be like, okay, I will never work with you. Like,
Yep.
And the hardest thing is that, like, you know, it's always a question for actors, like, where do you draw the line? Yes, people can say, oh, if it's like some indie person, yeah, no problem. But then let's say if it's like one of the biggest voiceover production companies, and you learn that there's an anti-Black like sentiment about it, that they don't hire Black people and they hate Black people, and you know it, but no one wants to talk about it. Do you want to keep working for that company? And that, I cannot tell an actor, hey, if you're not Black, to stop working for that company, because let's say they gave you a huge contract and you're like, well, I got to feed my family. I get it. But I do think actors have more power than they think they do. And so, like you said, if the actor can turn down the opportunity, pass the mic, it will speak volumes. And I think it's just like that, yes, it is up to the production companies, the higher ups, to make change in there, but change also does happen when actors make the decision to pass the mic. Like there was an actor I knew who got offered, he booked a part of an Indian character, but he was not Indian. And he was like, I don't want to play this character, even though I worked with the director, he's great, but I want to give it to someone who is. So actors who do that is like, it's rare, because it's like, you have a paying job. You're like, oh my God, I get to be paid. So more often than not, we don't do that. And I don't blame anyone who doesn't do that. But if you do, mad respect. Like you can change worlds by being able to say, hey, I'm going to give it to someone who represents that. And especially if it's like, with the attention on like LGBT characters, where it's like, if the character is, let's say, non-binary or trans or thing, and even its voiceover, they're like, oh, I could do it. But the thing is like, because those communities are so marginalized already, especially the trans community, it's like, how amazing it is that you can give a trans person who didn't have the experience to play this part, and now they have something on their resume, go, hey, I did something for Netflix, or I did something for a major company. And then that's how we get to get more work, because someone can go, there's that stamp of approval that someone worked on this network. But more often than not, we don't even get the chance to put ourselves in the door because of the gatekeepers who are blocking it for us. So yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of times there aren't casting people involved. So there's that. If, a lot of the smaller stuff, like especially smaller games, a lot of times they're casting on Twitter or on pay to play sites or things like that, or through their fandom. So there isn't necessarily caretaking in, all of casting is gatekeeping if you actually boil it down. I like to say it's curating a menu, but it is literally, choosing who to show to a client who will best represent that character. And, I think more and more casting people have more integrity and are trying to kind of keep up with the world changes and the demands for representation. But then there's also, I think people forget that casting people are day-to-day workers too, right? And we don't have a union, especially in games. CSA doesn't even recognize games, so you can't be part of CSA, even though
that blows my mind.
It's tell me about it. But that's why we just push the walls to the side, right? We don't care. We don't need them.
There's something I am just starting to really truly understand, and I realize that's the difficulty casting has, because, correct me if I'm wrong, legally as a casting person, you cannot explicitly say you are looking for this particular gender, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. You can say it. You can say we are looking for Black actor, but you cannot explicitly say only Black actors. Like Correct. That's legally, like, yes, I do see casting people, kind of break the rules by doing that, but legally you cannot do that. So even like I'm now learning with like gender, where it's like you can't explicitly say women or men, I've now seen the terminology like masculine sounding or feminine sounding, which in some ways is freeing, so that if people who are not a AFAB or AMAB, like they have the opportunity to try that, and if they are the part, amazing. But then I do realize that, like, in terms of like, let's say looking for Japanese actors, that they cannot say explicit, they'll say Japanese strongly preferred. And I, for the longest time, I didn't understand why they would do that. Why can't you just say Japanese? Come on, man. And I like, oh, so that if actors who are not that ethnicity want to audition, legally you cannot say no. Like they have, they are given the right to do so. And so that is something that that's the other roadblock casting people face, that like if they want that ethnicity, then they got to find a way to make it sound that they do, or they'll, you can see the hint where it's like if every single character has Japanese on it, then you can kind of get the hint that like, okay, they're looking for Japanese actors, but that's just a hint. They can't actually explicitly say it, which blew my mind. I was like, I didn't know that. Now I know. Now I understand why your job is so hard.
Well, and add to that those self-submitters who don't like to respect the
Oh my God.
request of what you're. So a perfect example is just recently I was looking for a basically non-white trans man, and I got probably 600 submissions on Breakdown, on Actors Access and Breakdown, and I asked specifically for them to include any kind of hints, as much as you can in the notes about their identity, so that you can parse through them. And when you go through all these profiles, you're forced to then see if there's anything on their profile that shows beyond a picture that they are either a trans man and or not white. And you're judging by a photo, which is like the most effed up thing that you could possibly do. And it's not the way that we want to be doing things. So when I'm thanking you for your list and thanking Queervox for their list, this is why, is because I can go in and people have self-identified in a way where I feel good about submitting them, and that I don't have to do like this roundabout verification of your identity, which brings up a whole other thing when it comes to gender identity and sexual identity, and sharing that in order to be cast representatively. But that's a whole other topic. But even just ethnicity and where you were raised and those types of things, I beg you guys to put those in your bios and your profiles and things, so that I can appropriately cast when you're looking, on those places.
It's funny you say that, because it's like that's something that, like, as we make this database, especially for the folks at Queervox and especially for what I'm doing, is that we have to, like, there is an honor code system where it's just like, if they put themselves, some of them are pretty like come on, like in the PGM voiceover list, there has been, especially in the past week or so, numerous entries from Caucasian actors who would just put in Caucasian as their ethnicity, or the best one is they would put as their ethnicity voiceover actor. And I'm like, all right, come on now, come on. I mean, like, at least try to pretend you're indigenous or something. And that, don't do that. Don't you do that, anyone who's listening. But it's like where they have no shame about it. They'll just put that. I'm like, all right, delete. I'm not even gonna put this part of it. But the thing is that there are some where it's just like, I sometimes have to do almost like a community check, because like, and sometimes it's fascinating, because like there will be people who are like, there was one person I remember, was a very white passing Black person, and I would ask, and I knew that person had mutual friends of a lot of people I knew, and I was like, hey, this is such a weird question, is this person Black? And then the person would go, yes, that person is, but they're very, 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 very light skinned, that no one could even think that they are, but they are. And so I'm like, oh my God, okay, good, because like the list is not like, yes, it is for about global majority, but like there are, especially when it comes to mixed race people and like especially for half Asians, where the whites can, like, it makes it look like they are completely white, but they're not. That is something where it's like, it does get tricky. And so I do, like, over time in the PGM voiceover list, to add the thing, like the check mark box, like, all the information I put is 100% true.
Right.
And that's also, once again, honor code, because it's like, and especially something I discussed with Queervox, like, especially because it is about sexual orientation, and that's not something visual that you can see, like to be non-binary, or to be like a lesbian or gay or queer. So what if someone just goes, I'm queer, but they're not? Like, how do you, and then they're like, well, trust. We're just gonna have to trust it. And it's just like, okay, we're gonna trust that is the case. Yeah. And that's something that's good, that's hard. Whereas just like, we, especially if I'm putting this list and then you find someone that's like, oh my God, this actor's great, they say they're of Cherokee descent, and then That's like, I remember that's the whole plot line of the David Henry Hwang play Yellowface, where he thought he hired a Eurasian actor only to find out that that person was just white. And then he got all this shit from his Asian community where he's just like, I thought he said, so, and yeah.
Well, one of the things I've been telling actors recently is like, you can do that. You can get all the way through, but the internet will find you. So like, as much as it, like, you can get it all the way down, you can get that film made, you can get that voice part, but someone somewhere down the line will find you and they will call you out and hands up. So
yeah, the internet will never forgive, and the internet will have no problem going through all your Twitter history of the past 7 years. And what that stuff happens, it blows my mind. I'm like, how do you have the time to do that?
They're sleuths, those internet sleuths.
My goodness.
It's true. Speaking of the internet, I want to address chat real quick. MCT Moss said, Edward, thank you so much for shouting out the African American voice acting database. Airtable is a really good resource. We're not sponsored by them. And then also King Low Tier wants to know, how much pushback do you all see regarding the PGM VO list, or making sure to match character to actor?
Okay, so from the realm of casting directors, there have been no pushback. Like, every single casting director has been like, praise whoever God you believe in. Like, it was amazing. It's amazing. If there is a pushback, without naming the company, this casting director told me that, she told the company that she was using the list, and then the company responded back, why are we using this list? It's a conflict of interest. And she said, what conflict are we talking about? For all our clients, for all our actors. And she's like, but why? And so it would just be this conversation she would have with them. And I found it fascinating because I would never imagine that a company would go, it was a conflict of interest, or that it would break NDA or something. And that's what I said earlier about like how the predominantly white institutions will come up with these language to say why they're against diversity without saying that they're against diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I would just listen to this casting director, and I'll be like, we both knew what they were trying to say, that they didn't want this list. They didn't want this thing to be as something to factor in when they can just cast whoever they want. Like, we have our own database. We have our own actors. Why do we need this database? And she was saying, it's not like we're not going to stop using that. Of course, we have our favorites. It's just saying that there's so many others. Don't we want new people? Do we want the same people over and over and over and over again? Is that what we want? And one of the person was just like, yeah, what's wrong with that? It's always, it's reliability. And I'm like, yeah, I get reliability. We see it all the time. We see like directors and actors who work with each other all the time. And a part of you goes, what happens if you don't work with Johnny Depp again? Like, that's just the kind of thing. And so that is, that's the pushback I've seen. But the pushback I've also seen was that there was this wonderful white gentleman who posted, there was a news article about PGM voiceover list, and he posted it on the voiceover actors community. And there were a good number of people who were very supportive. And then, shall we say, the onslaught of the naysayers came in, and they would just be like, well, this list is racist, and so is its owner. And it's like, why does race matter? Like, everything is so race. And then they just started like piling on, and I was just like, all right, holy crap, like, this is just ridiculous. But it's like, it's not a surprise. No. I shouldn't be surprised, but I've experienced this all my life, as have every person in a marginalized status, as a woman, as a LGBT, as a historically excluded person. We have encountered this countless times. So we get upset by it, but then we have to remind ourselves it's not a surprise. There's always going to be, there's that quote that I always remember where it's just like, for those who experience privilege, equality seems like oppression. And I'm like, I get it why, because it's like, if you have everything given to you and now someone wants like 1% of your pie, you're like, no, I want that 1%. Don't take that away from me. But for us, it's like that 1% is what all of us are fighting to get, that 1%.
Mhm.
and it's frustrating. And so that is the pushback I've seen in terms of that. But hey, I say that anytime any movement or initiative or project that is amplifying historically excluded voices gets pushback like that, that means we're getting attention.
Mhm.
Like, because before the PGM voiceover list, when it was just called a BIPOC voiceover list, it was just an Excel sheet that just kind of went by. But now that it's getting more and more attention from like the naysayers, then I know we're doing something right. If we're
Yeah.
starting to get hate, if we're starting to get naysayers, not to say it's easy, not to say it's it's for the weak minded or the weak willed, because it's really hard to get these kind of hate messages and being like, not let it affect you personally. And as
Mhm.
I imagine any actor who experiences that kind of thing, it's tough. But it's just like, that, hey, I must be doing something right to get
Yeah.
this kind of thing.
I think you mentioned it earlier, and I think you nailed it on the head. It's just like we want to live in a world where race and diversity, or race and ethnicity doesn't matter. But the issue is that we're not there yet, and
Yes.
this list is trying to get us there. And like, to the naysayers, like for myself as someone who is a part of this list, what I think a lot of those people don't understand is just we just want the opportunity to audition. We're not asking people to give us roles to cast us. We just want the same opportunity as everyone else to at least put our hat in.
Yes.
So
Well, and this is only half the conversation. The other half of the conversation is that the roles don't exist. For just the people of the global majority, but also the roles that they're even allowed to audition for. So both against race, but also for race or identity. A perfect example is like when I'm working on a trans role, and I make sure that I only have, trans identifying actors auditioning, but I'm not necessarily getting those actors to audition for the non-trans roles, although that's part of my efforts and
Yep.
thing is opening that up. But I think one of the problems is that there's just not enough of those opportunities either for the ethnicity. So a perfect
Yeah.
example is like, I cannot beg game creators enough to create Black female roles. There's not enough Black females in
No, there's
games,
not.
period. And I know this because I know so many incredibly talented Black actresses that I've not been able to get work. And it's really frustrating because I can get so many other people work and I cannot get them work. And beyond just those opportunities, just getting creators to make more mixed roles, because I think that's one of the things that we get a lot of times too, is in this like effort to be diverse, they pick these very like specific backgrounds, especially because in games, like they're creating these character profiles without really the whole story being developed a lot of times. And so there isn't necessarily a reason that they're picking them to be this ethnicity or this identity, that they just want that representation, which is great, but more mixed roles in general, because that's the way we look, and that's not represented currently.
You bring a very, very good point, which is that like in this effort, especially in the past year, for like increased diversity, like that kind of thing, the problem that I've seen is that sometimes, more often than not, it goes to the extreme where it gets so specific, where it's like, if we don't find this person, that's it, we give up. Like, we're gonna give up the search. And especially like that applies to like when it comes to, let's say, once again, the Asian American roles, where it's like, okay, let's say you're looking for a Japanese character who is like, if this is on camera, Japanese woman, 6 foot tall. If we don't find this person, then gosh darn, we're gonna hire, like, I don't know, Charlize Theron or whatever. So they'll do that. They'll set these extremes, and if they don't find it, then everything is like tossed. As opposed to be like, okay, we couldn't find a 6 foot tall Japanese woman, but we found a 6 foot tall Korean or a Chinese woman. Are we flexible to make changes so that it is still authentic to her, and as opposed to colorblind casting? Like, can we make the changes? And I see it happen all the time. Like, I did bring up Charlie Theron. Like, there was that Old Guard movie where the original character in it was a Japanese woman, but they found a Vietnamese woman who was perfect. And on that, requested the Vietnamese actress if she asked if they could change the character to be of Vietnamese origin. They're like, hey, no problem. You know, it's fine. You're great. Let's do it. And so it's just like they can do it. It's like they can always change it to make it more accurate. So if it's like, if you're worried that like, oh, they're not of that ethnicity, well, then change it. You can ask the story creator, you can ask whoever created it, like, and more often not, they're going to be okay with it. They're like, hey, you know, as long as my story, the spirit of it is still intact, whatever. And that's more often the case. And I think that's something I noticed with just humanity, and also with myself in general, is that we are kind of afraid to ask to make these changes. We just assume, oh no, we can't do it. And so then, because they go for the extremes of casting, like someone told me that there was like some project looking for like a Indian American woman who was intersex, and she's like, that is such a specific casting. Like, what happens if they don't find it? Like, do they just give up, or did it, like, what do they do? And so that's where it's just like, you do your best. You know, specificity is good, but if you can't find it, then you go, okay, you know, we were looking for, let's say, Asian. Okay, we couldn't find the Japanese. Let's look at, and if we didn't find within the East Asian, how about the Southeast Asians? How about the South Asians? South Asians, especially Southeast Asians, those two categories get so left out of conversation. So that when people say, well, you know, especially with the whole Raya controversy with so many East Asian actors voicing Southeast Asian characters, that I am all in support that for Southeast Asian and South Asian to voice all the East Asian characters. Just go for it, because East Asians have had such a monopoly on all Asians. And it's interesting when you like really dissect into like the inner racism of each PGM communities, that you go, oh shit, there's a power dynamic that happens in every single one of them. So yeah, so that's where it's just like the extremes of specificity of casting is good to a slight degree.
100% agree.
Yeah, the specificity can definitely get us into trouble. And it's like, I think that game creators can have a lead in this conversation, because a lot of times these stories are being created specifically for the medium, and it's not an adaptation of a book or a thing that existed that you're changing. A lot of times they're making these things up. And so making sure that they're hiring both people to write and then perform those stories is the goal wherever possible. That's one of the efforts on the Halp Network side that we're putting in a lot of effort onto, is not just hiring inclusively and representatively actors wise, but also hiring consultants, so that the narrative teams and the writing teams have the resources to be able to write in-depth stories about many different cultures and still have, and not necessarily have to employ someone from every different culture on their writing staff, but instead get to pay many different cultures to help and consult and form these stories. So that's kind of one of the goals.
It is a 12, and just as a respect for your time, Edward, I do think we would want you to come back and have more discussions on this, and yourself as well. But I do have a few questions for you before we end it, if that's okay with you.
Oh, no problem.
So I would actually like to know, if you were stuck at an island with 3 celebrities, who would those celebrities be?
Oh,
Yes.
I think I already have this answer ready. All right, here we go. Randall Park, Paul Rudd. Oh God. I think his name is Sterling Brown Jr. He was the actor from Sterling K. Brown. Those 3 guys.
You had that ready, and I'm so impressed.
Me too.
Oh, yeah, those 3 guys. Like I don't know, like those, they're like, yeah, they're perfect.
That's awesome. If there's something, so this doesn't have to be about the PGM list, but just for yourself, what is something that you know now that you could tell your past self, whether it's, you know, before you got your parents' approval on your acting, or sometime later in life, just an advice that you'd give yourself?
The advice I would give to myself is that all your imperfections, your insecurities, your demons, your darkest thoughts, all of that will have a purpose. You don't think it will. You don't think it might at that time, or your current time, because you think everything is pointless. But they will have a purpose, and people will celebrate you for it. That would be
That's
what I would say.
amazing. I want to talk to the teacher that told you to channel that energy into acting, because thank goodness for her, man.
Yeah. Yeah, she still teaches at that high school now. And so I remember like she invited me for like to talk to her high school students. This was before the pandemic times. And it was just so weird to be back in that school ground again and seeing all these like, these prospects. And they would always tell me like, what do you learn about acting? And then the funniest advice I told them was that everything you do in your high school, your whatever shows you've been in, will not matter when you do it professionally. And it was hilarious because you see like the high school kids who were like the popular kids, they get cast in all productions and they're like, I'm the diva. And then they go, oh. And then you see like, you could see the actors, the high school students who don't really get castings. They always play the small parts. They always get like the one-liners and their eyes just light up. And they're like, and because I'm like, it doesn't matter. Because I was that guy. I was the one who got cast as all the minor parts. And so I was like, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Like, it will not dictate who you are in the future whatsoever.
Good notes. Final question. What is the best way to eat a cinnamon roll?
Okay. Well, first off, there are now two. It used to be just Cinnabon. Now there are two.
Not a sponsor.
Hey, Cinnabon, the best way to eat a Cinnabon roll is through a Cinnabon. And when you eat it from the outside, because when you get to the center, when it's very, very soft, you want to enjoy that at the very last moment. The other product that now I've come to embrace into my life is something called Ubenabon. It is a Filipino version of a cinnamon roll. Yeah, it's made out of ube. So there's only one store. It's in Fulton, California, but they do delivery. Oh, sorry. So they just started last year during the pandemic. It was started by a Filipino American woman, and so I'm just really thinking about it. So they do delivery, but then you have to go to the Fulton store itself because they have like 9 different individual flavors that you can eat there. It is definitely the healthier version. So if a Cinnabon is too much for you, Ubenabon is just as delightful. It's definitely healthier. It's not all the way healthy. It is sugar, but those two cinnamon roll products I endorse highly. Like,
that sounds amazing. All right, and then plug yourself. Where can everybody find you and follow you and hear you?
Great. They can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Cinnabon Monster. Once again, Cinnabon Monster. And then for the PGM voiceover list on Twitter, it's just PGM VO List. And as of yesterday, we officially have our website. It's just pgmvolist.com. We have our own website. Once again, thanks to the amazing Risa May who made this website. It is now live, so it looks fancy, it looks legit, and I hope people like it.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you everyone in chat who joined us to watch their stream. People have been singing your praises, Edward. MC Tima says, oh, lost it. Many thanks to all of you. L Train says, salute Edward Hong. Smurf Brown says, appreciate you, Edward. So you've definitely made a lot of changes in people's lives with your list and your efforts. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us at the Halp Network.
I have a request. Depending on your schedule in terms of people you should interview next, do interview Anjali and JP Carlick of QueerVox. Yeah. Especially with the LGBT voiceover database they got going on.
You got it.
Yeah, they're in the queue.
Yes.
I'm hoping to get you a cinnamon roll sponsor in the future.
Yes.
I will say this, the closest thing I did is I did play the Cinnabon guy in a movie that the Cinnabon company endorsed me to be a part of.
Go.
So it has happened. It has happened.
All right, awesome. If you guys are interested in any of the Halp Network classes, you can go to halpnet.com/entertainment-academy. We have some stuff for you.
Someone had mentioned that there should be a class for motion capture for the PGM list, and actually at the end of the month, at the end of September. No, I don't remember what month. Yes, at the end of September, I'm doing a free webinar on everything
Mhm.
motion capture.
Oh snap!
So
Okay.
it's got seats left still. And yeah, anybody can sign up. So it's
Yes,
free,
and it's
free.
free.
The link is
So,
still up, right? The link. Okay.
yes.
Okay. I will definitely
And
put
yep,
that up.
awesome. That's it, I think, for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Edward. Nice to
Thank you
see your
s-
face.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay,
We'll
have a
talk
great
soon.
one.